if you would, let's open up to 1 Samuel 25. Wives are definitely a good blessing. I would highly recommend getting a good wife to anyone. Tonight we're going to read the story of David, Abigail, and Nabal. And the reason why I really do love my wife so much is because she keeps me out of trouble. A lot of times I'll be thinking of something, and it's pretty common for me to say, Melissa, I was thinking about this. Do you think that's a good idea? No, Tim, I think that's a horrible idea. I don't think that makes any sense. Here's 5 reasons why off the top of my head. And I think, okay, I see. That's a really bad idea. I mean, this is pretty common. And I think that's why God gives pastors' wives good wives, because they need people to tell them when they're completely wrong or when they're on the right track. Good things. But sometimes, have you ever been in a situation, this particularly applies to men, because this is where the story's going tonight. You ever been in a situation where you decided to act without consulting your wife, and you got yourself into some big trouble? This is not a good path to take, and this is, in fact, the path that Nabal chose to take, and it resulted in him losing his life. But the kind of theme of the sermon tonight is the idea of what we are to do when we are wronged. That's the major purpose of the night. David was certainly wronged in his interaction with this guy named Nabal. Nabal's name means fool. We're going to read the text and see that Nabal does make a fool out of himself by responding poorly to David. But it's not just when we are wrong that we have to make decisions, is it? Sometimes we are involved with people who themselves are in the wrong. This is where Abigail found herself. She was married to this guy Nabal, who is a fool. Nabal makes a fool of himself, and Abigail has to kind of clean up the mess. Have you ever been in a situation where you're kind of the one who cleans up the mess? Someone else did something foolish. Someone else said something foolish. It wasn't your fault, but you knew unless you acted, the mess was just going to stay messy. Well, Abigail and David are going to give us models to follow. Nabal is going to give us a model to avoid. All 3 of them are going to teach us lessons tonight. As we read the text. We're going to jump into it. It's a long text, short introduction. Let's get going so that we can get done. Chapter 25, verse 1. Now Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him at his home in Ramah. Then David moved down into the desert of Paran. A certain man in Maon, who had property there at Carmel, was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband was surly and mean in his dealings. He was a Calebite. While David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men and said to them, "Go up to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, 'Long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours.' Now I hear that it is sheep shearing time. When your shepherds were with us, we didn't mistreat them, and the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. Ask your own servants, and they will tell you. Therefore be favorable toward my men, since we come at a festive time. Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them." When David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name. And then they waited. Nabal answered David's servants, "Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I've slaughtered for my shears and give it to men coming from who knows where?" David's men turned around and went back. When they arrived, they reported every word. David said to his men, "Each of you, strap on your sword." So they did, and David strapped on his as well. About 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. One of the servants told Abigail, Nabal's wife, "David sent messengers from the wilderness to give our master his greetings, but he hurled insults at them. Yet these men were very good to us. They didn't mistreat us. And the whole time we were out in the fields near them, nothing was missing. Day and night, they were a wall around us the whole time we were herding our sheep near them. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one could talk to him." Abigail acted quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs, and loaded them on donkeys. Then she told her servants, "Go on ahead, I'll follow you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. As she came riding her donkey into a mountain ravine, there were David and his men descending toward her, and she met them. David had just said, "It's been useless, all my watching over this fellow's property in the wilderness so that nothing of his was missing. He has paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all those who belong to him." When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, "Pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please, pay no attention to my lord, that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my lord sent. And now, my lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives, and as you live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, may your enemies and all who are intent on harming you be like my lord Nabal. And let this gift which your servant has brought to my lord be given to the men who follow you. Please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. When the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord every good thing he promised concerning him and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or of having avenged himself. And when the Lord your God has brought my Lord success, remember your servant." David said to Abigail, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive by daybreak." Then David accepted from her hand what she had brought him and said, "Go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request." When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. He was in high spirits and very drunk, so she told him nothing at all until daybreak. Then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed him, and he became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Praise be to the Lord, who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head." Then David sent word to Abigail, asking her to become his wife. His servants went to Carmel and said to Abigail, "David has sent us to you to take you to become his wife." She bowed down with her face to the ground and said, "I am your servant and ready to serve you and wash the feet of my Lord's servants." Abigail quickly got on a donkey and, attended by her 5 female servants, went with David's messengers and became his wife. David had also married Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they were both his wives. But Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Paltiel, son of Laish, who is from Galim. If you will, let's pray and ask God to bless us tonight. Father God, Lord, cameras rolling or not, we know that, Lord, I have nothing good to say. I just pray that you would speak. I pray that you would just remove me and lift up your words, Father, that we would see, that we would understand what you desire for us to see and understand from this text. So, Father, we love you. I pray your Spirit would come in this moment and open our hearts and minds to hear and understand. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. 3 movements in this pretty long story. First, we see crisis arises. Then we see crisis averted. Finally, we see the crisis avenged. We have here kind of a parenthetical statement at the beginning of verse 1. Samuel had died at this point. Now that's important. It's included in the narrative. One, because Samuel was an important figure. He was one of the stature of someone like Joshua, someone like Moses. He was a great figure in the history of Israel. But the point of including it here in the text is to show that David at this point is kind of on his own. Remember, so far we've seen in the text, David's anointed. Saul knows he's going to become king. Jonathan knows he's going to become king. Everyone knows he's going to become king. Samuel has anointed him. And up to this point, he's almost used Samuel as kind of his older brother, as kind of his maybe grandfather who protects him from Saul. He's been running from Saul, but we knew that Samuel was in the background, in the picture, kind of as a lifeline for David that he could call on when he needed him. But at this point, Saul has pursued David. He's kind of backed into a corner at this moment. He's said he's not going to pursue David. We know from the next chapter that he's lied. He's going to continue pursuing David. But Samuel now is dead. And so the importance is, who is going to have David's back? Samuel's gone. God's man who's on David's side is no longer in the picture. So what is David going to do whenever Samuel is no longer here? Will he truly trust in God, or will he go his own way? And that's the purpose of the story. He sees here that he has men who are hungry. They want some food, and apparently they've been protecting this guy Nabal's sheep. Now Nabal, we said, his name means fool. He acts very foolishly. David sends men to him, and think about this. David is the anointed king of Israel. Everyone knows this at this point. He's going out with kind of his Hell's Angels, this group of ruffians that come to him. Remember, it was all those people who were despised in Israel, all those people who couldn't really find a home. They went to David. They saw him as an outcast. They kind of banded around him. We said we saw a figure of Christ in this. And they are with him, hiding out in the wilderness, when they find out that it's sheep shearing time. Now, Nabal is a wealthy man. He's got 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep. So David's thinking to himself, I've helped this guy out. I've guarded his sheep. I've guarded his people. I've kept them from being killed. I've kept his sheep from being carried off. And by the way, what's the shepherd's most important function? It's protecting the sheep, right? You have to find them food to eat, and you have to protect them. We see that in Psalm 23. The famous psalm of the shepherd. You lead me beside still waters. You lead me to green pastures. You restore my soul. But you also guard me with your staff of righteousness. So David performs basically the most important function for these people. He does them a huge favor. And in the culture of the ancient Near East, right, one good turn deserves another. It's similar now, but even more so then. David honors them, and he honors their master by providing them protection. And so he goes to Nabal and says, hey man, you've got 3,000 sheep, right? Surely you can spare a few for me and my guys. We helped you out. Come on, I'm going to be the king. I want to make a friend here. Let's do it. Let's make the deal. Look at the greeting he gives there in verse 6. As he sends his men to talk to Nabal, he says to him, long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours. Really, it's the same word here. He's saying shalom, peace to you, peace to your household. He says it 3 times, indicating, hey, I am for you. I'm not against you. I'm your friend, not your enemy. I want to come and bless you. David gives blessing, and he wants some food in return. But Nabal's response raises the temperature. David offers blessing and requests food. Nabal, in return, offers scorn and returns insult. Look at how Nabal responds there in verse 10. He says, who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Now, who else do we know in the narrative refers to David as the son of Jesse as a slur? Saul. This is how Saul refers to David. Saul can't even say David's name. He hates him so much. He just says, that son of Jesse, that son of Jesse. Well, Nabal here, as an insult to David, doesn't say David, God's anointed soon-to-be king. David, the one who slayed Goliath. He says, who is this David, this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. That's a direct slap in the face. He's saying, who are you? You're just a servant. You're not someone who's anointed. You're someone who's breaking away. There's no special relationship that God has with you. Then in verse 11, he shows his selfishness. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I've slaughtered from my shears, and give it to men coming from who knows where. He not only insults David, he insults David's men. He takes this blessing that David gives him, shoves it back in his face, says, I don't want any part of you. I'm not grateful that you've guarded my sheep. I didn't ask you to do that. And so he says, I'm not going to do anything for you guys. You're on your own. Nabal proves his name is true. And I think the point here, we have to ask ourselves, why is this story included? It's kind of interesting, it's kind of entertaining in some ways, but what's the point here? Well, the whole point of the story is to show how David is going to react with someone like Nabal as opposed to someone like Saul. Think about it. There are significant parallels between Nabal, this fool, and Saul, who also shows himself to be foolish. They're both ungrateful. Saul has David, his prime warrior, who goes out and fights his battles, who goes out and slays Goliath, who goes and does what Saul should be doing. And he's ungrateful. He doesn't show his gratitude. He wants to kill David. Same thing with Nabal. He's ungrateful. He's unloving. He doesn't return kindness for kindness. Same thing with Saul. David is loyal to Saul. Saul is not loyal to David. And Nabal is undeterred. He comes, he has a chance to regard David as he should be regarded, but he doesn't do it. Saul, same way. He's got a chance to say, look, you're more righteous than I. He said that in the last chapter, but we're going to show that his statement was not true. So Nabal proves his own name true. He's a parallel of Saul in those ways. And at this point, we have a crisis. And I think, at this point, I want us to see that our culture is significantly different than the ancient Near East. And really, the ancient Near East today isn't a lot different as far as the honor and shame type culture. If you shame someone in an ancient Near Eastern culture, it's more than just an insult. I mean, it's more than just personal. You are basically saying they are worthless, they're not worth your time. Think of the instances in the Old Testament where we have significant shame being offered to people. Think of the instance in Genesis where you have Jacob's, the 12 tribes of Jacob, the Simeon and Levi. No, it's not. It's Reuben and Simeon, the first two sons. They're insulted because of what is done to their sister. They go out for blood because of what's done to their sister. Story in Genesis. Honor and dishonor. That's what's going on all the time whenever it comes to Jesus and the Pharisees. It's not simply that they want to ask him a question because he's a really smart guy. They are out to steal his honor. We can think of it in terms of almost like the Japanese. The Japanese kamikaze pilots? They were basically brainwashed into giving their lives for the sake of honor. They would do whatever it took to maintain the family honor. It was basically, if you come back alive, you are going to shame your family. And so what did? They gave up their lives because honor to them was everything. So whenever Nabal kind of slaps David in the face, it is extremely deep. It's extremely important. And so this crisis arises. The temperature here is boiling lava hot. As David responds, they report to him, and he says, each of you strap on your sword. So they did. And David strapped his sword on as well. And this is the point. This is the hinge. This is the crisis moment that we need to hone in. What is David going to do? He's clearly been wronged. He has every right to expect that Nabal would return kindness for kindness. He hasn't done anything wrong. In fact, he's gone above and beyond his own obligations. And what happens? He receives a slap in the face. How should he respond? What will he do? And by the way, this is the same question we need to ask ourselves. This is where we put ourselves in David's shoes. Have you ever been wronged? Blatantly. Flagrantly wronged. Fragrantly. Oh, there it is. Okay. Have you ever been wronged? Right? You ever been on the other side of that coin? Where you did what was right, they did what was wrong. There was no questioning. You were in the right. We've had situations like that even recently, haven't we? Talk about the pastors who were subpoenaed in Houston. They didn't do anything wrong. How should we respond in situations like these? How should we respond? Well, David's going to give us a model. we ask the question, what is he going to do to Nabal? He wouldn't strike down Saul, but what is he going to do to Nabal? Nabal isn't the Lord's anointed, so he gets his sword. He's going after him. He's had his honor disregarded. He's going for blood. And then what do we see? We see this beautiful woman, and it says that in the text. You know, I've never seen her, but it says in the text she's a beautiful woman. She acts quickly. And don't you love this? The Bible is just full of these kind of women who are fast on their feet, who know what to do, who turn a crisis that has arisen into a crisis that is averted. Here's Abigail's intervention. By the way, this is where we also see kind of a secondary point of the text, right? Sometimes we have been wronged, but sometimes we have to act for those who have done the wrong. Sometimes we're David, where we've got to respond to being wrong, but sometimes we have to be Abigail. What do we do when we have to come in and clean up a mess? Well, she gives us an absolutely great model of this, how we can react whenever someone else that we're close to, we're tied to, we can't get away from them, maybe we're married to them, maybe we're related to them, but some way that mess that they have made affects us, and we have to come in. We may be the only people who can do it. We're called to be peacemakers, and we have to take responsibility even when it isn't our fault. Look at what Abigail does. You just have to love her. Kind of like Ruth, kind of like Tamar, kind of like those women, Rahab, who do what is necessary whenever no one else will. The servants come to Abigail. They say, look, Nabal insulted David and his messengers. They were very good to us the whole time. They protected us. They did right in our eyes night and day. They were a wall around us, and the whole time we were herding our sheep near them. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He's such a wicked man that no one can talk to him. Now notice what she does not do. She doesn't try to go talk to him, right? I mean, sometimes wisdom dictates that you cannot reason with people. First thing that she does is she doesn't try to change his stripes. Now there's going to be moments whenever you might be able to reason with someone. You might be able to show them the folly of their ways, but she knows he's too far gone at this moment. He's not going to turn. There's no time for it. She doesn't try to change his stripes. Instead, look at what she did. It says in verse 18, Abigail acted quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs, and loaded them on donkeys. This is not someone, by the way, this is parenthetical, this is bonus. This is not the kind of woman who said, I've got to ask my husband permission for everything. And praise God that wives do not always ask their husbands permissions for what they do. Sometimes God gives them a mission that's more important than permission. But what does she do? She gets this ready. She goes on ahead. She says, go. She sends her servants. She says, I'll follow you. She didn't tell her husband Nabal. She doesn't want the fool coming in and ruining the plan. And as she came riding her donkey into a mountain ravine. I mean, this is just like, you almost wonder what kind of theme music would be in the background if this were a movie. You've got a woman on a donkey riding down into a ravine to save herself and all of the servants. I mean, this is like Wonder Woman of, 1500 BC, right? Okay, she comes down, she's riding. David just said, it's been useless. I've watched over this guy, I've protected him, and he paid me back evil. This is to heighten the suspense. David is literally about to take his sword. He says, he makes an oath to God. And he says, I'm going to wipe out every single male of those who belong to him. The stakes here are high. This is like the high boiling point. And yet when Abigail, verse 23, when she saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down to David with her face to the ground. First thing she does, she doesn't try to change his stripes. Second thing she does, she responds with humility. Even when it wasn't her fault, she responds with humility. Bows her face down to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man, Nabal. He's just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my lord sent. She responds with humility, and then she distinguishes herself if possible. Here's what I mean by this. She shows that she was not involved in the decision. I think sometimes when we're trying to clean up other people's messes, sometimes we try to take too much on the chin. I think that's possible. Abigail, I think rightly here, says, look, If I were there, I would have tried to do something. I wasn't there. I couldn't do anything. I can't take full responsibility, but I can take some responsibility. I'm coming here. I'm doing what I can. She doesn't try to pin it all on herself. She distinguishes herself as possible, and then she continues on, and now, my Lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives, and as you live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, may your enemies and all who are intent on harming my Lord be like Nabal. And let this gift, which your servant has brought to my Lord, be given to the men who follow him. She offers him a gift. She acknowledges the wrong deed. She says, it was clearly wrong. He's a fool. He's someone, don't even pay attention to him, she says. Acknowledge the wrong deed. And then what does she do? She acknowledges David's own righteousness. I love this in this next paragraph. Please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my Lord. Why? Because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God, but the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. When the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord every good thing he's promised him and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or of having avenged himself. She's saying, you are anointed. You are righteous. You haven't done anything wrong. Nabal did wrong. You are in the right. And I think we have to be careful when we're trying to clean up other people's message. We've got to call it like it is. We've got to say, listen, this was completely wrong. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Please forgive him. And we've got to acknowledge you were in the right. I was in the wrong. And then I love this last thing that she does. She points the offended party. She points David toward the grace of God. She says here, look, the Lord your God has secured you. The Lord your God has brought you into the land of the living. He will preserve you. He will make sure that you are appointed ruler over Israel. She points him back to God. And I think the point here is to point back to the grace of God. David was just a shepherd, but God raised him up. She points to the grace of God and said, the God who brought you from shepherd is going to make you king. So by his grace, show us some mercy. She points the offended party toward the grace of God. And then point 6 out of this. I didn't number those points, but here's the 6 points. Flattery never hurts. All right? Notice what she says. You got to love this. I mean, this is classic. You know, I'm not trying to step on any toes. This is a classic woman to me. You know, I look at this and I think, this woman she is wise. I mean, what else can you call it? Look at what she does. She calls him my Lord. Over and over and over. I think it's 14 times. She says, my Lord, my Lord, my Lord. She's trying to say, I get it. You're above me. You could kill me. I'm trying to be humble. I go to my feet. I go to my face. My Lord, please forgive your servant's presumption. Please keep yourself from this bloodshed. Hint, hint, wink, wink. I mean, sometimes wives have to do this. When they know their husband isn't actually going to listen to them, there's kind of the wink, wink, nudge, nudge, subtle hint that sometimes is subtle, sometimes isn't so subtle. But men usually get the hint. I think that's what's going on here. And then she adds some things, right? You fight the Lord's battles, big guy, right? You fight the Lord's battles. And no wrongdoing will be found in you. That is, unless you don't do what I'm about to ask you to do. You see it? We see it, right? The life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God, but the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. Well, what story have we read recently about a pocket of a sling? She's saying here, may all your enemies be like that guy you took down. Kind of reminding David, scratching his back a little bit. Hey, I've seen your highlight reel. I mean, I think you're pretty good. I'd say you'd make my top 10. That's what she's doing. She's buttering him up a little bit. And listen, I mean, whenever you know that you're affiliated with the party in the wrong, I'm not saying that you have to manipulate, but I'm saying, come on. When you know you're in the wrong, you can call it flattery, you can call it humility, you can call it whatever you want. But Abigail gets it done because of how she presents it. And then I love verse 31. She just lays it out. My Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed of having avenged himself. She makes it clear. Please don't do this. She doesn't ask for it, but it's clear. And this is classic woman language. She doesn't ask for it, but it's clear. Right? And so what does David do? The crisis is arisen. The crisis is averted by what David says here. He responds. He says, David said to Abigail, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you to me today. May you be blessed for your good judgment in keeping me from bloodshed this day, from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive by daybreak." He says, Abigail, you got me. All right, I'm not going to do it. If you hadn't come, I would have. But David responds to Abigail's speech with forgiveness. And this leads us into the main principle of the text. The main principle of the text is this. If you let God fight your battles, you always win. If you let God fight your battles, you will always win. Look at David's response. David responds because Abigail changed his mind on Nabal's behalf. Notice that Nabal's sin did not change. Nabal's sin remained what it was. He still insulted David. He still rubbed his honor through the mud. But David's attitude toward him changed because of the action of an intermediary, because someone came and pointed David to God. What do we see here? For David, Abigail's response changed his mind, but for us, it's Christ's death for us that changes our attitude toward others. And this is how, remember, the Old Testament always points us forward. The Old Testament always is a spotlight pointing forward toward Jesus. We see in here the grace of God. We should always respond with forgiveness toward people because we have been forgiven in Christ. The New Testament affirms this over and over and over again. Even in the Lord's Prayer that He taught us to pray on a regular basis. Father, forgive me of my debts. Forgive us as we have been forgiven. This is what He tells us. This is what He tells us over and over and over again. For us, Christ's death for us changes our attitude. We should always respond with forgiveness because we have been forgiven. Now, because we've been forgiven. Now, notice with me, all right, this is not where the story ends. You know, David just didn't turn around. And, I mean, he did turn around, but he didn't just turn around. He goes back. Christ is averted. You know, you kind of imagine them. They're kind of eating, drinking. They have this feast. Abigail probably staying, playing hostess. Well, what happens in the meantime? Abigail saves the day, but she goes back to this crumb bucket Nabal. And when Abigail went back, she saw Nabal in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. Now, that's intentional as well. Nabal is acting like he's the king, while meanwhile, the real king is eating all of his food, and he doesn't even know it. So truly, Nabal is a fool. He doesn't even know that his wife made all of that stuff. I mean, like, seriously, you don't know when all of your stuff is missing? But he's drunk like a skunk. He was in high spirits. She's told him nothing at all until daybreak. Then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed him, and he became like a stone. And we don't know what this was. We don't know if he had a stroke. We don't know what happened. But it says that he became like a stone. Now, by the way, that's intentional as well. We just saw that Abigail says, may your enemies be like those who go out of a sling, right? We saw that earlier in the verses. He'll hurl your enemies away as from the pocket of a sling. And it's no coincidence that Nabal becomes like a stone. Just like another stone that was hurled from another sling, David's enemy hurled away. But notice that it's not David who does the killing. He became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal and he died. Look at David's response because it shows us the main principle. If you let God fight your battles for you, you will always win. Look at what David says. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Praise be to the Lord, who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He, the Lord, has kept his servant from doing wrong and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head." David stayed his hand because of Abigail's intervention. The crisis arose. The crisis was averted, but then God avenged him. And this is how we need to think. This is how we need to view it. When we are wrong, whenever someone clearly violates us, when someone robs us of our rights, when someone comes up to us, takes away, insults us, disregards our honor, we need to learn to let God fight our battles for us. Now, why? Why do we do that? Because it's an act of faith. It shows that we truly believe that God will intervene on our behalf. God will be the one who will come in. God will be the one who will guard our honor. If we find in Him a refuge and strength, we will not fall. We will not fail. But if we try to do it ourselves, guess what? We're going to fall. We're going to fail. By the way, this is the key difference between David and Saul. Key difference is that Saul fought his own battles. You remember the sin of Saul that lost him the kingdom? He took over the role of the priesthood. He sacrificed the lamb instead of waiting on Samuel. Right? He tried to do it himself. He didn't wait on God. He tried to take up the battle by his own right. But David allowed God to fight his battles for him. We saw that in David and Goliath, didn't we? The reason that David defeated Goliath isn't because he was such a great warrior. It's because he was anointed by God. And he said, it's God's battle. The battle is in God's hands. So we see, if you let God fight your battles for you, you will always win. David was kept pure. He was kept clean. So what do? When we are faced with this situation, we do the same thing. Let God fight your battle for you. There are going to be times when your boss unjustly ridicules you. There are going to be times maybe when your family members, your parents, they just don't understand. Maybe they've wronged you in a very deep, harmful way. Vengeance is mine, saith Tim. No. Saith Brent? No. Saith John? No. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. We need to let Him fight our battles for us. We have to fight the temptation to fight our own battles. We align ourselves with God and recognize that He will defend us. David was one who was truly a man after God's own heart because he let God go before him and fight the battle. Now, as kind of an addendum on the rest of this is the Paul Harvey rest of the story kind of deal. David sent word to Abigail. Nabal's dead, 6 feet under at this point. And David asks her to become his wife. He sent servants to Carmel and said to Abigail, David has sent us to take you to become his wife. Again, she bowed down her face to the ground and said, I'm your servant, and am ready to serve you, and wash the feet of my Lord's servants. Again, she quickly got on a donkey, and attended by her 5 female servants, went with David's messengers, and became his wife. David had also married Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they were both his wives, but Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Paltiel, son of Laish, who is from Galilee. Now again, we're going to see, how is David going to respond? Saul has told David, I'm not going to do anything to you, you're safe. Saul has given Michal to David as his wife. But now we see that Saul again is going to wrong David. Saul is again going to pursue David. So will David apply these lessons? We know he will. But it's the same lesson. Let the Lord fight your battle for you. When your archenemy gives away your wife, let the Lord fight your battle for you. He'll achieve victory. Now, just as an aside, David takes upon himself many wives, right? What are we to make of this? I don't think this is Abigail's fault. Whenever the king-to-be asks you to become his wife, you probably aren't going to say no. She finds protection from David. She finds relief in David's company. But I think it's always good to remind ourselves that both in Genesis, and Jesus reiterates it in the New Testament, how many wives did God make for Adam? Uno. And there's no need to say uno mas. All right? Just one. That's all any person needs. As David and Solomon, I'm sure, now attest to the fullest of their hearts. So, anyway, as we end, we just need to remember, let God fight your battle. Because if you let God fight your battles, you'll always win. And that's the lesson David has to teach us. And if we can make that our DNA, we'll be good to go. All right, let's pray. Be dismissed. Father, Lord, thank you for your grace. Lord, and I pray that truly we would be people who trust you enough to let you fight our battles for us. Father, help us to offer forgiveness in Christ. to all who wrong us. And Lord, help us just to serve you faithfully. We have to clean up a mess, Lord, to do it humbly and to point them to you. Father, I thank you just for each person. I thank you again for this church. What a blessing it is. So use us, Father, to live out your kingdom. And we pray it, Father, in Jesus' name. Amen.